Sissy mistake scene 8. Over the next week, Mother and Tess provided a crash course on behaving as a young girl should. There was considerable attention to keeping my skirts in mind, so as not to display too much to casual observers. It almost took some of the pleasure of wearing a skirt away. Well, not really. At night, I had to get accustomed to not wearing pajamas. The nightgowns were so shiny and slick and, well, wonderful to me, that I had difficulty letting myself just drift off to sleep. Over time, of course, I got used to the feeling and soon was relaxed and comfortable with the newness. I had several sets of panties with all the days of the week embroidered on them. I actually wondered why, but got no answers from either of my teachers at the time. Later, I did take some pleasure in occasionally putting on the wrong day, sort of a mini rebellion to being trained to be a good girl. I took pleasure in knowing I had sort of gotten away with something until one day when I hadn't paid the proper attention to my skirt and heard my mother behind me asking just exactly why I thought it was Sunday. Oops. One afternoon they broke the news, we were all going out. I remember thinking out loud they must be kidding. After a few minutes, Mother led me to a full-length mirror in the front of Tess's store and stood me in front of it. "Now, what do you see in that mirror?" she asked seriously. I looked and looked. What I saw was me, wearing girls' clothes. Well, not really me, but what I see is a frightened little girl, but a girl nonetheless. Look very closely now, my mind said it was me, wearing a dress. My eyes saw a girl. But it was me, after all. I was so confused about what I was doing. Over the next hour or so, though, Mother made it clear I wasn't getting out of leaving the privacy and safety of the confines I had been in, and so I asked her to help me pick out and change into a different dress. Tess fixed my hair just right, and Mother took my hand as we walked slowly out the door. Even though I had slowly become more confident over the past week while inside, going out into the world was frightening. I'll always remember feeling so exposed. We walked to the car and Mother let my hand go so she could get her keys out. I suddenly felt a bit nervous standing alone as she unlocked her door and got in. She reached over to unlock the passenger door and I quickly opened the door and started to get in. Mother stopped me, reminding me it would be appropriate for me to sit in the back and let Tess take the front seat. I stopped, turned around and moved out of the door opening to offer the seat to Tess. I was so nervous. But Tess, sensing my concern, leaned in, reached around and unlocked the back passenger side door. "Thank you, dear, but I think I'd rather sit in back, if you don't mind." As she slowly slid into the car, my manners sort of took over and I actually closed her door for her. What was I thinking? I was now alone, in front of everyone, wearing a dress. I quickly moved to get myself into the car without thinking what they had been teaching me only that day. Somehow I managed to stop myself, gather my thoughts, and turn slightly, sitting on the seat. Keeping my knees together, I swiveled myself in and quickly yanked the door closed. The exposed feeling was certainly magnified being outside like I was, and I clearly understood the skirt training lessons with a much greater appreciation. Phew. Mother just smiled. Feeling a little more safe in the car, I tried to relax while Mother drove us to a nice restaurant. Getting back out of the car was even more nerve-wracking, but I managed. As we began to walk, Mother once again took my hand and reassured me I looked wonderful, and to relax. Oh sure, easy for her. What if SHE had to wear a dress in public? Oh. But, as we walked along the sidewalk, we passed several people and nobody seemed to stare at me. I even began to feel sort of confident. Finally, we approached the door of the restaurant Mother had decided on. A man standing outside quickly opened the door and we all walked in. As we passed through, I heard him distinctly say, "Have a wonderful evening, ladies." Wow. After we were seated, and drinks were ordered, well, a Coke for me, Mother suggested she and I go wash our hands. And so, off to the ladies' room. Oh my goodness, is there no end? While we were in there, she suggested I might be wise to do something else, just to get used to it, and reminded me quietly to sit. All I could think at that instant was, "Mother." But I have to admit I might have forgotten under the circumstances of my nervous state. How embarrassing. Once again, as we exited the ladies' room, I felt a bit of fear walking out in view of everyone. But, again, no one seemed to pay any attention. Wow. Again. By the end of our dinner, I often glanced around to see who was looking at me and snickering, but I was almost sure someone would, but no one was staring at me. Walking back to the car was a little less scary, I think. I even shocked myself a little when, walking past an angled window, I saw my reflection and was about to look behind me to get a better look at that girl and her beautiful dress, and maybe even get a glimpse of a petticoat. Then it occurred to me that I was the girl, and it was my dress. I actually stopped and slightly raised my skirt in front, just to see my own petticoat. It was wonderful. The outings became more frequent over the next few days, and especially during the daylight hours. Each of the lessons were aimed at changing a lot of my previous behaviors in favor of new ones. My own confidence was improving. What I found most interesting was that, after even that shorter time, the clothes all started to feel not unusual. Perhaps I was getting used to them, but it was still all very special to me. At the same time, I didn't feel so out of place appearing in public. My movements were getting more girlish and I began to feel more and more free to be that way. For the first time, I wasn't having to hide anything. But then, my stay with Tess was over. I had grown very close to her in those few weeks, but what a filled few weeks it was. She had taken me from a boy who liked to play dress-up with his mother's clothes to a young lady, at least in appearance and behavior. It really was a sad day when I had to say goodbye to her. She was, well, sort of a second mother, I guess. This photo is one Tess had taken just before we left. She sent me a copy much later, after we were situated in Portland. As we drove away, Mother told me there were several suitcases in the back of the car filled with more new clothes for me. "It will reinforce the illusion I have picked you up from your trip, see?" I thought it was pretty smart myself, young lady, and she smiled. On the way home that day, I remember having mixed emotions. That old fear had slowly crept back into my brain. What if someone recognized me? What if everyone figured out who I really was? And as we pulled into our driveway, my biggest fear was standing right there by the mailboxes, Mrs. Adams. Mother just reminded me I was her niece and a very well-behaved young lady. "Don't worry, and you're too pretty to be wrinkling your brow like that," and she smiled at me. As Mother got out of the car, I slowly opened my door. Recalling all my recent lessons, I got out as gracefully as I could and inched out, slowly closing the car door behind me. As I turned toward the back of the car, Mrs. Adams was standing there, looking me over with her infamous eagle eyes. Oh no. But Mother had worked her way to the back and opened up the rear door to get several suitcases out. She turned and cheerfully greeted Mrs. Adams, then turned to introduce me. "Well, so this pretty young lady is going to be staying with you." She had that smile on her face and I was just waiting. Suddenly, she held out her hand and introduced herself. Nervously, I took her hand and, as I had sort of remembered, greeted her and introduced myself as Catherine, Aunt Marge's niece. She just stared for a second, then quickly moved her hand to my hair and felt it. I thought for sure she was onto the disguise, but she just commented on what lovely hair I had, and how much it looked like Mother's hair. Why I didn't just scream and run, I'll never know to this day.